I think that hope is practical, and I'm a very practical person. And whether it's with my patients or my teams, it's very distinct from optimism. Not only in medicine, but in our society, there's a lot of uncertainty. And especially when circumstances are hard, it's about helping people believe that there is a path forward. And I'm not going to say it's going to turn out all rosy and perfect. However, it's believing that we're going to get through this and we're going to move forward. So I love that concept of hope.
You're listening to the Growth Edge Leadership Podcast, where leaders sharpen their edge and elevate their impact. Let's grow together. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Growth Edge Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Laurie Baedke, and I am so excited to be joined today by a friend and colleague, Dr. Jennifer Soung. Dr. Soung is a board-certified dermatologist currently practicing at Southern California Dermatology in Santa Ana. She specializes in medical dermatology and clinical research. She is the founder and director of clinical research at Southern California Dermatology, where she conducts clinical trials in addition to a thriving private practice. And she is also the founder of LEADderm, a CME course that sits at the intersection of leadership and community and diversity in dermatology, which I am certain will be a topic of our conversation today. But before we get there, Jen, welcome to the Growth Edge. Thank you for joining me today.
Laurie, I'm so excited to be here. And before we get started, I just want to say how much I adore you. Thank you for believing in LEADderm and the vision from the very beginning. You probably remember we met because I just randomly emailed you. I heard your lecture on the Harvard Women's Leadership Conference and just fell in love with your message. Your friendship, encouragement, and support have been incredible. And beyond the conference, I look forward to your emails about leadership. They challenge me to think differently, help me grow. So thank you for all the ways you've impacted my life and mission.
You are so welcome. And it has been such a delight and a privilege to get to know you as well. I love the gumption and initiative that you took to reach out to me and invite me to be one of your speakers at the inaugural LEADderm course 2 years ago. And I am so excited to be rejoining you next month for the third annual. But frankly, kind of on that topic of initiative, it is something that I admire so deeply because that's a page from the playbook that I undertake. And it's one of the reasons why I've had many of the opportunities that I've had is just reaching out and introducing myself and asking for opportunities. And so when you reached out, it was just such a joy to get to know you and then to learn about your vision for LEADderm was a treat. I can't wait to share that with the listeners shortly, but maybe would you mind taking me back, just predating that vision and you're bringing it to fruition? Was there a particular moment in your career where you realized that leadership was going to be just as important as your clinical expertise?
If I had to pinpoint the moment, I would say it was taking the director role of clinical research in the Department of Dermatology at UC Irvine and being the new psoriasis expert right after finishing residency. It was my first real job, and just 12 weeks after having my second child, I was asked to rebuild an entire research department. We had one coordinator, one study, and a really big vision. Clinically, I felt prepared. I was involved in clinical research since medical school and completed a research fellowship. But leadership, I wasn't so sure. I remember wondering, am I qualified to do this? And looking back, I only recently realized that this feeling wasn't new. As the oldest of 3 children, I had spent much of my life being handed responsibility and not being taught how to lead. The responsibility came before the preparation, and I'm always someone who loves a challenge. So I told myself, with a lot of encouragement from my mentors, I jumped in, gave it everything I had, and learned along the way. Now, med school and residency taught me how to diagnose and care for patients, but no one taught me how to build a team, inspire people, give difficult feedback, or have hard conversations, create a culture where everyone felt fulfilled going home at the end of the day. So I started to read books, listen to podcasts, and learn from one of my earliest favorite leaders, Simon Sinek, who completely changed how I viewed leadership. I realized leadership isn't about having all the answers or having the loudest voice. It's about creating an environment where people can thrive. And so while as a doctor, we become experts in medicine, but there was like an entire set of skills I had never been taught. And I became fascinated with a side of medicine that I'd never been exposed to. And that completely changed how I thought about my career.
It's amazing. And I think that mirrors the journey that I've heard for so many others. We don't necessarily understand what we need to learn until we come to identify and understand a gap, right? What delta exists between who we are today and what today is demanding of us, or, what skills we have, and then what skills we need to build to not just survive, but to thrive going forward. So, how did that really kind of translate to your ability to identify a gap that existed in the market? You're a dermatologist and you've attended a number of CME courses over the course of your career, no doubt, but you've now launched a weekend CME course and have been building a convening and a community. What was it that you saw um, that helped you to understand what others hadn't, that kind of convinced you that LEADderm needed to exist?
Well, first, Laurie, I never had a goal or had a vision of starting a meeting because there's so many dermatology meetings and I didn't need to. It felt like, okay, there were enough. But what made me realize that there was a gap was as I continued to talk to my friends and colleagues about how do we keep our staff happy? How do you find meaning in your work? Or how am I going to be a present parent, manage the stress, or even take time to exercise and be healthy? My experience and questions weren't unique. And many others had the same challenges and struggles. I also noticed that many of the leadership voices that we heard most often didn't reflect the incredible diversity of our profession. Examples and models of leadership we've been exposed to often represented one version of what a leader could look like. So I started asking, how do we create a space where more people can see themselves as leaders, or where different backgrounds, experiences, perspectives are included and recognized as strengths? And I kept thinking the best place to start that conversation is at a conference where we bring people together who have similar ideas and share these conversations and stories and learn and grow together. And what I realized that when I went to other meetings is that there's so many incredible people in dermatology. And the most meaningful conversations I was having wasn't at the session. It was when the meeting was over, during dinner, in the hallways, or over coffee. These were the moments when people opened up, shared challenges, and exchanged ideas. And I started wondering, what if we build a conference around these conversations? And that's where LEADderm really filled that gap. So it's about teaching leadership skills and creating a space where people can connect, learn from each other, and grow.
I love that. And I have a strong hunch that you had no idea what you were really in for when you thought, okay, now I see this gap and I understand this gap and I've got this inspiration. But starting a conference from scratch is absolutely no small undertaking. What was it that gave you the courage to take that leap?
Honestly, it's people like you. As I talked to more and more people in the healthcare leadership, my colleagues and friends, they knew how I've been so passionate about these topics. And even in my own journey, I saw that as I studied these leadership skills and listened to more people, I became empowered and I was learning so many things and growing as not only a physician, a parent, a leader, a mentor, a collaborator. And I thought, my goodness, I want to share this. And on top of that, seeing medicine change in so many different ways that I wanted to make an impact beyond my own kind of clinic or patients. And so it's something that I became really passionate about. And like you said, when I first started the conference, I had no idea where this is going. And so after 2 conferences, I realized LEADderm was becoming so much more. It was something much deeper than I had imagined. At the second conference, people were excited, not only because the sessions were so different from a traditional dermatology meeting. We had topics like negotiation, finding purpose in your work, etiquette and professionalism in social media, and work-life blend. And what people talked about afterwards wasn't just about the content. They talked about feeling inspired and energized. There was this palpable energy in the room. Watching people connect, come up with new ideas, and support each other made me realize this was so much more than leadership education. It made me feel like all the work was worth it. And I also noticed something about the people who came to LEADderm. They were all curious. They were willing to ask questions, reflect, grow, and become more intentional, not because they wanted another title, but because they wanted to make a greater impact in the lives of people around them. The biggest surprise for me, honestly, and I only connected the dots a few months ago, was that leadership isn't just about what we do. It's about who we're becoming. It's how we listen to people, how we treat people, how we respond when things are hard, and how we help others. It made me think, is it about human connection? And this led me to the question I've been thinking about lately. Is becoming a better leader really about becoming a better human? Now, I'm still working through this idea because I keep coming back to the word human, and I never want to tell someone else that they're not being human. But maybe it's because so much of medicine today feels dehumanizing. We have prior authorizations, step therapy creating barriers to care, the increasing corporatization of healthcare, less physician autonomy, and then technology and AI becoming part of more and more decisions. So in that environment, I feel like leadership is less about authority and influence and more about bringing back humanity into medicine. Well, I'm really curious. We haven't had a chance to talk about this, and you're hearing how LEADderm is evolving, and I'm curious what you think, Laurie.
I think you're spot on, Jen, and that resonates deeply with me. And it resonates because it's compelling. And everything that you just said, we are humans, and so much of the humanity has been stripped out of medicine and the traditional healthcare experience. So much of the beauty of humanity has been stripped out of our experiences around us societally in a digital domain where people interact in ways that they would probably never and perhaps shouldn't interact in-person interactions. And it proves so much of what I believe deeply about the fact that we are rational individuals who have technical knowledge, but the things that actually move us are emotional. We are emotional beings, and our minds are emotional. And the beauty in life, in community, in connection, in the communities in which we can learn and grow and be challenged, or to practice self-compassion or contribute compassion to others, is human. And so you're preaching to the choir in me, but I also think this is likely why you have found a ready audience with your colleagues in dermatology who want to come and learn about these things and share and talk about these things so that they leave better formed, or at least with their curiosity piqued. And if they don't have the ideas fully baked and ready to execute flawlessly, they probably won't ever, because we are in fact human and fallibility is a part of the equation, but they feel that it's important that we continue to pursue it, hence your use of the word becoming.
You almost read my mind. This year, as you know, I shared with you personally that I am going through my own leadership coaching. And one of the things I learned recently was not striving for perfection all the time. That was something I didn't even realize I was doing. And so I continue to think, and as LEADderm evolves, perhaps that when we become better humans, we naturally become better physicians, colleagues, mentors, and partners. And that's ultimately how we build a better profession. So interestingly, I chose this year's LEADderm theme, Strong Ground, before I fully understood why. I was creating a conference centered around helping people becoming more grounded in their values, purpose, relationships, and resilience. And looking back, I think I was asking myself that same question. And it's the question I hope everyone leaves this year asking: what grounds me? Because when we know what grounds us, we become more intentional in how we live, how we connect, and how we care for others.
And I am very excited for my experience with you next month. But I'm curious also, what is something that physicians aren't systematically taught that ultimately has an outsized impact on their careers in medicine?
You know, Laura, I think it goes back to, if you will, human skills. I think medicine does an incredible job of teaching us the science. And remember, my background is rooted in the science. I'm a clinical researcher. That's that's my background. And for me, it answers so many questions so that I can better guide patients and help patients live better lives and healthier lives. And what I found over time, I had so many amazing treatments and tools, and the research continues to grow, but in some ways, I wasn't delivering impactful care. And it really came down to many other skills. How do we navigate those difficult conversations? Or a resident just asked me yesterday, what happens when a parent tells you, well, I want this test, and it may not be the right clinical decision? So I have learned so many skills beyond now the science and treatment of medicine. So skills like listening with curiosity instead of just waiting to respond, building trust, not just with my patients, but with my teams, communicating with clarity, figuring out conflict instead of avoiding it. And most importantly, humility. So for me, leadership skills isn't just for people with titles. Every physician is leading every day while we're leading our patients, medical assistants, research teams, our families, and often one another. It's about how we show up. And that was another big aha moment for me this year, is that leadership is really about a way of being in all areas of our lives. So to me, those human skills are what transform clinical expertise into meaningful leadership. And especially with AI advancing so quickly in medicine, I literally just yesterday, as I was talking to the patient, they were asking me some really hard questions. And I said, hey, that's not a medicine that we routinely come across in dermatology. Let's look it up together. And we're going to use AI. And technology will continue to help us process that information, recognize patterns, and make better decisions. But people will always remember how we made them feel. So I really believe that these human skills are what make us so irreplaceable. And I believe they'll become even more important in the years ahead.
That's such a powerful example of where improving your leadership, not necessarily just your clinical knowledge or expertise, makes a meaningful difference. And it's not that the latter is not important. You're a phenomenally well-trained and capable physician, as are all of your colleagues. But both the pace and velocity of change is very, very challenging to keep up with. And also, just that ability to invite someone into a conversation and say, let's do this together. I have to imagine that that patient was probably felt very seen and also really appreciated and respected your ability as a physician to use the expertise that you have, but also to say, let's see if there's something more that we should discover together. It's a very human connection example that you shared.
And I think throughout my training, I always felt like as a physician, I had to have the answer, right? But what leadership has taught me is that you don't have to be right all the time. And it's okay to say, I don't know, or I was wrong. And those moments don't diminish your credibility. They often build trust.
They really do. And I actually, last week's podcast episode was on that very topic. And I think as leaders, we do our trainees or earlier careerists or any of our colleagues a disservice when we don't acknowledge vulnerably or humbly, I don't always have the right answers, or I don't always have the answers. I don't always make the best call. I might have to rethink, or I might have to apologize because I misspoke, or your idea was better, or I made the wrong call. And those are never easy moments. They're not easy moments as leaders, but they are so important because when we don't do that, we do a disservice to others that think that they have to present infallibility. And that's not possible. And think
Exactly.
about the pressure and the insecurity that exists within all of us. If we're all being honest, we all wrestle with that, but especially for our junior colleagues. It is so important that we bring that type of curiosity and humility and the courage and vulnerability to say those things, knowing that it shouldn't diminish our credibility or our competence, but in fact, it should bolster it. And that is not perfect in its application, but it should be something that we all strive for. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And in fact, I've learned personally is that when you're always striving for perfection, in fact, that can often intimidate or alienate your team because
Mm-hmm.
they're always so afraid that they're not doing enough or they're not doing it right. And then it defeats the purpose. Like my goal is to make an impact, a positive impact, empower the people around me to do their best and to thrive. I always say at the beginning of my day, my goal is that you come to work and we're going to take great care of patients. And you're going to feel fulfilled at the end of the day that we did such a great job. And I've learned so much about whether it's being a better parent or a better physician or leader to my staff is it's all the same skills.
I think that that is really amazing. And I think that I love that you mentioned the personal domain as well, because I say all the time, so much of leadership is is equally applicable in our professional domain as it is in our personal domain. And when we're thinking about the importance of vulnerability and courage and that type of resonance that's necessary, that is something that's necessary for the humans that are your patients. That's necessary for the humans that are your offspring. And as a mom, I am acutely aware that our children, especially as they become, teenagers and young adults, aren't always wanting that connection with mom or aren't always wanting mom's advice or direction. But that coaching, that connection and the trust that is built and the rapport there is something that if I'm playing the long game is something that I'll bet on time and again. But
I like that. I do have two teenage daughters now, and they are quite challenging. And you're so right. I like to look at it as the long game.
yep, yep, absolutely. Okay, well, our time is running short, but I have two more questions that I want to tee you up to speak about LEADderm and just
Excellent.
how it lives. And I will say, I'm going to include in the show notes a link to the course because it's coming up at the
Yay.
end of August
Yes.
in Newport Beach, California. And I know registration will still be open as of the published date. And I would love, love, love for any of the listeners who might be so inclined to join us for LEADderm to do so. But think about what it is that, when I experienced the first LEADderm, you had such a palpable and intentional design. I could tell that you wanted to create a sense of community. You've already alluded to that in our conversation today. But how did you execute on that? What was your vision for the gap that you'd experienced? And how did you nudge that into the design of the course as it's delivered?
I love your question, Laurie, because I'm so happy you noticed. And what makes LEADderm so different is that every part of the experience is intentional. You've heard me use that word many times because I didn't want this to be just another conference. And to me, another conference is people come, listen to lectures, collect information, and just leave. I thought about every detail from choosing the hotel as our location to the way we structure the program. I wanted to create a space that felt different from the pace of everyday medicine, a place where people could slow down, reflect, connect, and be open to change. So, even something as simple as sharing meals together was intentional. I love cooking, and sharing good food is breaking bread with people and creates a different kind of connection. Some of the most meaningful conversations don't happen during sessions, they happen over coffee, dinner, or sitting next to someone you just met. So, our goal is to intentionally create those opportunities for people to share their stories because stories is how we understand each other. And when we hear others have faced similar challenges, doubts, or moments of uncertainty, they realize they aren't alone. And at the end of the day, I hope people leave LEADderm with new skills and new ideas and with something deeper, a sense of belonging, new relationships, and a feeling that they are part of a community that supports them. And to me, that's the heart of LEADderm because medicine can be so isolating. And so creating a space where people feel connected and reminded why they chose this path is really the heart of LEADderm.
Makes me so excited to get back to be a part of it again. I love it. I can't wait. Okay, our time is up, but I have two quick rapid fire questions I would
Sounds good.
love to close with. First is, what's one thing that you're still working on as a leader, Jen?
Oh, wow. So many things. So when you tell me one thing I'm working on, I would still say I'm still refining my personal mission statement and learning about myself. A really hard question that I say hard because I'm almost avoiding it is what do I stand for is what my leadership coach asked me to think about. And sometimes I'll just open my laptop and I'll stare at a blank screen. I'm like, I'm not sure where to start. And there are certain things I do know for sure that I stand for. And maybe I wonder if there's even something deeper than that. It's just surface level. So that's been tricky for me. And what I'm realizing is what I stand for, what I believe in, what my core values are all connected in all areas of my life. And so sometimes it can feel overwhelming. And so this week has been really nice. I've been an empty nester. My two daughters went to Japan on a trip for 2 weeks, and my son has been doing a summer internship. So it's giving me some really good quality time to be by myself and carve out time to reflect on this. And I think it's so important, going back to my theme of strong ground, is that once I have that mission statement or understand what my purpose is, I can move forward with clarity, especially with something so big like LEADderm. I get so much feedback all the time, and also a person who likes to take everyone's feedback. So I'm like, oh, great, thank you. I'm going to incorporate that, almost to a point where I'm trying to people please everyone. So I would probably say that is also something I'm working on, so my mission is clear, and when I face tricky or hard situations and someone tells me, hey, I don't like when you do that, or is that I don't take it so personally because I know exactly what I stand for.
Carry on, because that is such a noble pursuit, and it is a messy one, as you've acknowledged. It's difficult to excavate It is challenging to prioritize the time that's necessary to give that clarity. And it is also something that if we do not pursue it, we can find ourselves living a knockoff version of someone else's life. And that's not sustainable for us either. And that's my deep belief. And so I want you to feel seen in the fact that I am, and I'm guessing every other listener is right there with you in the fact that we're all pursuing greater clarity over our mission or our purpose or where we can create the greatest impact. Last question before we close is just finish this sentence. Great leadership is
hope.
I love that.
I think that hope is practical, and I'm a very practical person. And whether it's with my patients or my teams, it's very distinct from optimism, not only in medicine, but in our society. There's a lot of uncertainty. And especially when circumstances are hard, it's about helping people believe that there is a path forward. And I'm not going to say it's going to turn out all rosy and perfect. However, it's believing that we're going to get through this and we're going to move forward. So I love that concept of hope.
I love that. And that mirrors for my listeners who have probably heard recent episodes where I've mentioned that hope is something that Gallup has said very recently in new research this year is the single most high need of followers. Every one of us wants hope, and it's easy to play the cynical card and say that that's false optimism or that's performative. But frankly, if we're honest with ourselves, we all want to believe that we can be better and the world can be better. And so I love that definition. And Jen, I just so appreciate your joining me for this conversation. I'm going to share links in the show notes to the LEADderm conference site. If anyone listening would like to join us in Newport Beach at the Pendry the weekend of August 29th and 30th, 2026, please do. And I will also include links to individuals so that they can find your practice website and follow your work. I will be looking forward to sharing an amazing and exciting, informative weekend with you in a couple weeks. Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you, Laurie, for having me. And it's always a joy talking to you. I learned so much from you.
Thanks for listening to the Growth Edge Leadership Podcast. Until next time, stay curious, keep growing. I'm rooting for you.